I don't know if anybody else on Zoom is not hearing Tim or any, oh, Tim was talking for a second. I'm getting no audio from the room.
Can you hear us now, DJ?
Yes, now I can.
None of us had our mics on. That could have been the reason why you didn't hear us.
There you go.
Yeah, don't worry, we're not talking about you.
Well, not yet anyway. No, just kidding.
Lots to talk about there.
That's what happens when you're just a black box.
Can't even see your smiley face.
That's right. All right, what a gambler.
This is power.
This is power?
Yeah.
The block of wood is power. All right, it's 6:01 p.m. and it's time to start CIP. Woohoo! So we have a really great agenda this evening. We have EMS, fire department, IT, library, and the senior center. So first off, I think we need to do a roll call. Somebody here ready to do that?
Sure, I can do that. So for the roll call, alders that are standing committee chairs, we have Sherlucky. Looks like you're, yep. I could read your lips. You said you were here. All right. Schumacher.
Here.
Reeves.
Here.
Majewski.
Here.
And President Hirsch.
Here.
You're not really a standing chair, but you have the great pleasure of running the meeting, huh?
Right, and then absent and excused is Greg
Yeah.
and
Alder
Phil.
Jensen and Caravello. But we do have a quorum.
Yep. All right, are we in compliance, Dave?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Oh, election of chair and vice chair? Why is that in
Well, it's
there?
just vice chair, unless you want to designate somebody as the chair, but there's no reason to. You're here.
All right, do we need a vice chair? Is that Lisa?
We would if, we would need a vice chair if for some reason you couldn't make the next two meetings.
No? Okay. Okay,
So we need a nomination.
second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Brett, for standing up.
Yep.
Oh, wow, we get approval of minutes from September 22nd of 22. Does anybody have any edits or additions? If anybody have a memory from back then? No.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Not yet.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, motion carries. And first we'll have a budget overview, and I believe that we'll pass it on to Dave for a budget overview.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I got a updated. Phil, you arrived at 6:05. 6:04. I'll go with 6:04 then. You were here in spirit. Okay, can the folks at home see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to try and make this brief. I timed myself, it's down to 57 minutes, so we should be good. Okay, so I was asked to, especially because we got several new alders, just going over the budget process. So this is basically phase one. The ad hoc CIP committee meets to basically say, yes, we're going to issue debt or not. And the departments are saying what they want to buy, and then we say, yes, we'll issue debt for you. Phase 2 is then Committee of the Whole, which basically reviews the operating budgets for all the requests. And with the current statutes that have been in place in the last 12 years now, if we don't tax to the max, we're hurting ourselves in future years. We're giving up money. So just like every other community, we're doing the same thing. Is that me by chance? Hang on. Okay. So with the levy limits, we can basically go up about 2% this year, which means that if a department is basically asking for more than 2% increase for their department, we have to find ways to cut another department unless we can find some additional revenues. And that's the key to it this year. But then phase 3, the Common Council takes input from both the CIP committee and the Committee of the Whole, takes their recommendations, meets again on the budget, and then adopts the budget and tax levy in the same evening. From what I've seen historically, there's usually very few changes at the City of Stoughton once it gets to the Common Council, but of course they've got that opportunity to do so. I mentioned the debt levy limit statutes out there. It's actually two portions. You've got the debt levy, and the caveat is that debt can't be used for operational costs. So if we're going to buy a car, yes. If we're going to buy a skateboard to allow me to move around City Hall faster, no, that's an operational expense. It's not a capital item. So we can only issue debt for capital. There's no limit to the amount of levy that we can have under the debt levy. We could go up as far as we want to. Of course, the elected officials have to decide if they want to go up that high. The only limit that we have related to debt is the dollar amount of debt. The state says our debt level cannot be more than 5% of our equalized value, which is pretty similar to assessed value. City actually has a little bit more restrictive policy at 4% of equalized value. And according to the latest financial statements, we're at 2.34%. We're definitely below that limit. And I mentioned just briefly that equalized value is basically the state trying to make sure that everybody trues up their assessed values, so they're going to do some assumptions to make it up. In our case, we always strive to be at 100% of assessed value for all of our properties, so in our case, the two are almost interchangeable. And I forgot to mention, if anybody has any questions as I'm going, feel free to interrupt. The other part is the operational levy. Now that's the tough one that we got to deal with every year. We've been dealing with this now for 12 years, like I mentioned, and as you can guess, that low-hanging fruit is quite gone. You know, the 100,000 that we found here or there, you're not going to find it. It's more the dimes that we're going to find at this point. So the allowed increase is basically the increase of equalized value due to net new construction. That's basically saying, what's the selling price of that new home? Okay, that's how much the equalized value went up by, you know, for the calculations. Statute doesn't care anything about price increases. So whether it's wages, gas, groceries, Bill Gates wanting to charge us more, the vendors saying we got a 5% increase in the cost, bubble gum has gone up in price, whatever you want to say, the statute doesn't care. I just saw some headlines today that inflation's starting to creep up again. Statute doesn't care. And here's me on the soapbox. So we're limited to 2%, yet the most recent numbers from Department of Revenue for wage contracts for CPIU, cost of consumer price index urban, 6.2%. That's a gap of 4.25% roughly. We got to figure out a way to do it. That's why I said this is the tough one to deal with. Something new for this year. The legislature gave us and every other local government supplemental shared revenue, and we are extremely thankful. I can't say that enough. The legislatures did it. We all got together, whether it's the cities, the towns, the counties, saying we have to have additional money. And that is a sustainable revenue source because it's based upon sales tax. So unless the economy really tanks and sales dwindle, prices are always going to go up, so sales tax is always going to go up. So for 24, we're going to get 323,825. I call it 325 just for round figures for conversation. Next year, we're going to get about 331. So we're already seeing that it's going up, which is good, because the old shared revenue was the same for the last 20 years, I believe. However, only certain departments can use that revenue. Police, fire, public works, and within public works, it's only the streets, not parks or cemetery. Emergency medical services, municipal court, and building inspection, which is part of planning and development. So I've got some numbers in here right now, and I threw in an estimate of $4.4 million for the debt levy. We don't have the final numbers yet. But as you can see, and I'll be walking you through the calculations on the next screens, but the total levy is going to go up 5.5% dollar-wise. But the value of property went up by 13.66%. So the average home, if it's a $100,000 property, your taxes are going down by $50. It's just the math. Call it smooth sailing for a reason. So we just had our second best year of net new construction, 156,000. We have a new sustainable revenue from state of Wisconsin, 325,000. That's almost $500,000 in additional revenue. Should be easy, you'd think. No, it's not going to be. Lots of numbers here on the page, but I took the two columns. One is net new construction, one is supplemental shared revenue. And I just said, okay, what's the total increase that we have in revenue? Health insurance, we were told that it's going to go up by 12 to 15%. Conservative accountant and me chose the 15%. And in both cases, you're looking at about $95,000 on average. And then I put in a 2% wage increase. And I know realistically we can't do 2%. The employees would be upset about it. We'd have a hard time retaining and attracting people. I know it's not reasonable, but for this purpose I threw it in. So for those departments that just have the net new construction limit, like my department, that used up every single dollar that we have for increase. And for supplemental shared revenue, we would have about 55,000 available. Now, I've already heard at the department head meeting, most departments are asking for additional help, and we are lean. We're hurting in many departments. We need more help, but the money's not there. So I'm back to, we either got to find new revenue, decrease expenditures, or use fund balance. That's the same every budget year. I've got some ideas for this year. You're going to see at the next council meeting, I'm moving some things around that we were used to be putting against the capital outlay funds, and reduce debt. I said I'd like to use those for operations. The other thing I've got this year is investment income is a lot higher than it was before. It's going to make my life easier, but the devil's in the details. And I see I'm missing a slide. Let me go back for a minute. I updated it with the slide, and I must have not saved it correctly. But I'll just go from memory on that slide, and I'll make sure it's in the next deck. When we were talking at council, I mentioned the mill rate is going down, and that's because it's simply a function of math. The mill rate is calculated by taking the tax levy divided by equalized value or assessed value times 1,000. So when the number on top goes up by 2% and the number on the bottom goes up by 16%, math says it has to go down. Like I said, I apologize. I thought I had that in here, but we'll make sure it's in there for the next one. So I'm sure that the folks in back are upset that I kept it less than 57 minutes, but are there questions from anybody?
I mean, that's a lot that you just went over, so anybody online that has any questions for Dave, especially the new folks, it's time to learn, you know.
I just want to say, Dave, I appreciate you walking through that. I thought it was very clear. It puts the math in perspective. I think I understand a lot more from your last conversation at council this week and also this presentation, so thank you.
You're most welcome.
Any other questions? I'm sure as we go on, there'll be more questions. So with that, thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
I think we move on to presentations, and the first one is EMS.
Well, I'm actually the one who put this on here. If you remember earlier in the year, the council approved using ARPA funds for the ambulance. So we amended the 23 budget for it. And we've been informed that the chassis won't arrive till 24. So therefore, we need to have that expenditure in the 24 budget. I'm making the assumption that the numbers that were used on the resolution for the grants and ARPA funds will remain the same for calendar year 24, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and if you have a problem with that, please let me know and we'll figure out something else.
And Lisa is in the room if she is. Anything else? No? Anybody have any problems with pushing it back, unfortunately? How bad is that for you not to get your ambulance until 2024?
Ideal.
Sorry about that. Anything else from EMS?
So what do we have to do? Do we have to, is this group making a recommendation, or is it just going to be going to council for the,
I think it's to go to
Well,
finance, right?
what's the process, I guess?
You could do it either one of ways. You could approve the CIP requests for each department as we go, or you could wait till the last day and make some adjustments and do everybody at once together. That's totally up to you folks.
I think that's usually how it goes. We listen to everybody and then we make the adjustments. But for, I think the mayor was talking about this particular ARPA fund resolution, do we need to make a motion on that tonight? Or does it have to go through finance and others first?
Well, actually, the because we're creating the '24 budget, you could wait till the last night of CIP committee, because then you're going to be making the recommendation to the Common Council to accept the CIP as whatever's figures there. And then when Common Council approves the budget, that puts the numbers in for EMS that, for the '24. So finance really wouldn't be involved in the process per se.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we'll wait on that until,
We wouldn't need to do then a '24 budget amendment into it because we'd already have placed it into the '24 budget.
right.
Right, yeah.
But all
there's-
we're doing is
But do we
kicking
have
the
to
ball.
amend the '23 budget, or is that already done?
23 was
You
amended,
could
right?
technically amend the '23 budget to take out that. I personally would leave it in. You're showing that you had planned to do it,
Okay.
especially with ARPA. I've got to show the appropriation, so I'd prefer that not happen.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're doing everything correctly.
Okay?
All right, next department up is the fire department.
Do you want me to run the screen, or how do you want to do this?
I got it.
You got it? All right. Oh, you just kicked me off of there.
Yes, I did.
I guess you do have it.
I didn't know that you could do it until I tried it and said, it'll take the person off. I'm like, cool.
I know what's going to happen now.
You'll be kicked off.
Next thing, that gavel will be gone.
Yep, so it all starts.
No, no,
So
no,
you
no,
just
no.
let me, yep, you got to turn, there you go. As
Okay.
long as it's red, it's hot mic.
Red is good. Okay, fair enough. All right, so my name is Josh Ripp. I'm the fire chief to those that haven't met me yet. I tend to be a fairly expensive request. The mayor and I, we chat about that quite a bit. But it's so that we can do a whole lot of stuff in a hurry and make sure we can do it reliably. So, so Tim, next slide. Or sorry, Dave.
No problem.
So this is kind of the layout from 24 to 28, kind of some planning in there. We've got a lot kind of stacked up into 24, readjusted a little bit because one of our big ticket items is tentatively scheduled for 25, which is a fire engine. Like every other vehicle that you're going to hear about, they're getting really expensive and they're taking forever to get. So we're replacing a truck that's currently 22 years old that is, we have put in quite a bit of work into it, and just yesterday we found out it needs a little bit more work for a part, but it's all the nickel and diming is starting to become a bit of an issue with this truck. And then you look down the road to 2027, that is not a typo. 1.9 million is kind of an estimate for replacing a ladder truck. That's based on what we've seen in trucks around us that are comparable, using 5%-ish to kind of forecast what the cost might be. 2027 is important in that there's some emission regulations that are taking place, and as of today, and you'll probably hear this from Brett as well, there's only one company, one manufacturer that thinks they'll have a truck that is compliant, or an engine that is compliant with EPA. We've been looking at some of the electric vehicle models that are out there. I've seen two different versions. The ladder trucks, they haven't even started building any yet. They're focusing on the engines, and they're the smaller ones. And they're roughly twice the cost of what a standard engine, conventional engine that we would build today are. And that doesn't include any of the infrastructure to put it in. So I'm counting on trying to get a ladder truck and get that purchased with before the new emission regulations are attached to the motors, because there's a few years where they have to dial that in, and there's some pretty big reliability issues that have popped up over the years. So that's kind of where our time frames are on those two trucks. All right, Tim, next, or sorry, Dave.
Not a problem.
I'll figure it out eventually. So this is just a quick request for 2024. The mezzanine and the fire bays, that's something that we'll discuss a little bit. That ties into another project that's going to come through Rodney, but it will be part of the public safety discussion. I just get to be the first one to talk about it. Next. So we start talking about the different challenges that we're looking at. We're finding the computers that we buy are lasting about 3 years in the trucks. They run 24/7 full tilt. We don't have air conditioning in the bays, so there's some heat issues that come up. And after 3 years, and this is at the recommendation of IT as well, is we just plan replacement of everything, so none of them are older than 3 years, just so that we make sure that the computers are on and reliable. We have enough challenges with Windows throwing updates and forcing them through on us for us to be able to keep them running so that all the firefighters at 2 in the morning have that information available when we respond to a call. PPE, all the gear that we wear, standards are changing. One of the new things is our bunker gear. Part of what makes it waterproof and makes it work well are PFAS. So now they're redeveloping all the materials that go into gear to be PFAS free, and that is turned into a thing. So new is costlier and all of that. Station updates, there's some discussions in there. That's at the end. There's some things that we're looking to do there to improve how our firefighters can work in the station, reduce the amount of time that they have to spend after calls trying to maintain the equipment, clean them, and all that. Next. Yep.
Not everybody may know what PPE is.
Oh, sorry. Personal protective equipment. It is the bunker gear that you see us in, the helmets, the boots, air packs. That's for firefighting. There's a separate type that's for wildland firefighting, and then if we start doing water rescues, it's a different set of gear because it all has different needs, different things that it has to do to help keep us safe. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
So quick to the PPE. This is jumping up a little bit based on current pricing, specific to our job duties. We're swapping out 10 sets per year. We are our bunker gear has a finite lifespan by NFPA, which is National Fire Protection Association. 10 years max lifespan on the gear is what we have. Once it hits 10 years, we take it out of service. We're also working to augment our gear quantities so that we have 2 sets of gear for every firefighter. 1 set that is 0 to 5 years old and 1 set that's 6 to 10. We go on a call and it is full of stuff from the fire, or we're on an accident call and it's full of stuff that we need to get cleaned off of it. While that gear is being cleaned, that firefighter's out of service if they only have a single set of gear. So it's a backup set, or if there's damage to the gear, it can take 2 months for us to get stuff swapped out. The gear is size specific to the individual, etc. And then the tech rescue, swift water stuff. We are part of a grant with Dane County. We sent people through training this year. We found out that the less expensive gear, we tried the wetsuit side of things, didn't quite work out real well, especially if the water is cold in any way, shape, or form. We had a couple dry suits that we tried out, and that turned out to be really, really better for our people to keep them safe, encapsulated from whatever's in the water too, and just temperature-wise a whole lot better. Next. That's just kind of the quick rundown of everything in there. We're running about $3,500 to buy a set of pants, a coat, and some of the other stuff. Gloves, we go through quite a few just because they wear out. Bloodborne pathogens, heat and moisture, all of that. Next. And this is the swift water stuff that I talked about. Everyone is getting the dry suit. There's a big PFD that goes on specifically for that. Helmets, again, gloves and footwear, all of that. And again, it's all sized specific to people. So we have to buy it one person at a time. We did apply, Dane County did apply with us for another Fire Act grant. And so once we hear something more on it, hopefully we can send more members of the department through. That paid for 90% of the cost of some of this gear, short of the dry suits that we got. In the new grant, they wrote it hopefully, or wrote it and hopefully they give it to us to pay for the dry suits this time around, to pay for more of that. So, any questions on the gear? All right, next. Rope rescue is kind of an integral part. There's some other stuff that ties into there when we do the swift water stuff too. Not everyone gets in the water. There's a lot of people that are on shore doing their work. Next. More of the rope rescue. Those that were here last year probably remember the picture, but this was in a rope rescue class. I actually took this class, not so much that I intend on hanging off the end of the rope to rescue people, but more information so that if we get an incident, being able to know how all that works to be able to manage that properly. Next. Computers that I talked about, we now have computers in every one of our response apparatus so that the mobile data computers, MDCs, we refer to them, are directly connected to the Dane County 911 Center's computer system, their computer-aided dispatch. So as updates come through, we get that. We get mapping, which is the mapping that comes through comes out of Dane County Land Management. So it is as accurate of mapping as we can possibly find. Updated roughly every week or so. It goes through the CAD from Dane County Land Information Office and updated. And as important as anything is any of the warnings, safety warnings for places will show up on there, and we're working on getting pre-plans entered into there. So as mutual aid units come into Stoughton, or we go to help other people, we're all connected to that same computer system and can pull up those pre-plans as we're going there. Next. Thermal imaging cameras. These have been a big thing for a while. Our current, what I'll call big cameras that really allow us to do rescues in houses are turning 10 years old, and like any other technology, they stopped making these 6 years ago. So in trying to buy batteries for them, any repairs have become really super expensive. And at some point, if anything happens, we're going to end up short. So we currently have 3. We're looking to buy 3 more, approximately 10,000 a piece. We're looking at some options that may reduce that, but right now we're looking at 3 for at 10 grand a piece. This is really one that I wish we didn't have to consider, but in Dane County, law enforcement, EMS, and fire have put together plans for active shooter incidents. EMS handles the patient care. Law enforcement is obviously working with or dealing with the threats. Fire department side to this is we are there to help get the patients out in a semi-secured area, get them out so EMS can deal with them and get going. This is another batch of protective equipment that we have to purchase. We've been looking at options with law enforcement, with other fire departments in Dane County. Fitchburg has kind of been one of the leaders in developing this. Chief Pulvermacher was one of the incident commanders over at the Sikh temple shooting, so he's really done a lot of work in trying to formulate these plans. So we're really, I think we're on a good spot for what we're going to purchase. So this gets us vests with the appropriate plates and the helmets, so if we have to go in and do something, we have the gear for our staff to give them the ability to get in and get out as best we can. Next. Just an example of everything. 12 and 12, that gets us in our command cars and gear in the fire two to three fire apparatus, depending how we distribute it. Next. Our training room. So we moved into the fire station in 2009, and the tables were bought for our training room at that point. They have taken a lot of abuse over the years. The fire department training room was used for, obviously, fire department training. It has been used for many meetings. Many outside trainings were brought into there. And today, the fire department training room is one of the 3 largest rooms kind of in the city cache of training rooms. So we have a lot of people going in there for meetings and everything, and the tables are starting to show their wear and tear. On the fronts, the laminations are starting to come off. The tables actually will flip up so that we can put them in a closet when we don't need them all. There's about 30 tables in there, all in all, that we're looking at replacing. So last year, we had gotten a price for deionized water system for the fire station. And the purpose strictly is washing the trucks after we come back from calls. Currently, the process is truck backs in, we rinse it down, soap it, rinse it down again, and then we have to go dry it. Otherwise, it's full of water spots because of the wonderful minerals that we have in the city of Stoughton water system. Nothing against the utility, just that's nature. As we were starting to design it, we found out that the company completely, that we got in the price through, completely misunderstood everything with the project, and the $5,000 was woefully inadequate for what we needed to do. So it's about 10 times more to actually do what we need to do in the station to get the water system upgraded and into there. We've looked at trying to run through our running through the water softener system in the station, but with the increased salt use and the sodium and salt mixing on the trucks, corrosion is a problem as it is. That's why we're washing them. I don't know that we're actually going to gain anything by doing that, and that's roughly half the cost of the new price, which is still far more than what we had scheduled for last year. So, next.
Chief, one
Yep.
question on your DI system. Is that a distilling water system, or is that a reverse osmosis system?
We've got pricing that's kind of both ways.
Sure.
But our big issue, what we're trying to do is to run it through the garden hoses that we already have mounted in the station, and it's the capacity that was our big issue. So.
Well, I'm just wondering if you have, if you have a distilling one, that one is going to have fewer replaceable parts in it.
Okay.
Where your reverse osmosis is going to have filter changeouts, resin bed changeouts, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So there would be downstream costs associated,
maintenance costs in
annualized,
addition
yeah.
to the purchase.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, Lisa, is down at the EMS station, is that one distill or is that reverse osmosis? Do you know?
That one is a
Filter? Okay.
that's a filter system.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's an
Yep.
RO system in there, so those all have downstream.
Yep.
Yep, they all have downstream costs on them as far as changing out the filters and things like that.
So, okay. Yeah, we're still trying to figure out all of that, but that's kind of what we've gotten, is that 50,000 mark seems to be
Okay.
where we're at. And that plumbs everything in and gets us good to go.
I just went through validating a pharmaceutical grade water system, so.
Oh, gotcha. That's good to know. I may be talking to
Sure.
you anyway. All right, next, Dave. All right, so this is a project that'll kind of blend into another. We'd gotten pricing on, or had gotten money for an architect to start working on a mezzanine for the fire station. The intention was to add a second floor steel structure that we could just store stuff upstairs and clear up from some floor space, and maybe add some internal training structures in the station, so in the wintertime we can do things. Where we're at with the fire station, we have very little space around that allows us to do training at the station, with the park and the parking lot and all of that. However, since putting this all together, we've kind of developed, got together with the planning department and public safety. We've kind of realized that we probably need to start a planning process for space needs for everybody across the city of Stoughton. EMS, fire, police, and otherwise taking a look at things. The price for this, part of our problem in trying to put something up in the fire station is we've got in-floor heating. This would require some work in the concrete floor, which means dealing with those tubes that are buried in the concrete currently for footings and all of that. And there's a lot of labor in that $150,000 mark. It truly was twice what we thought it might possibly be on the high end. So I think we're, in talking with the mayor, the discussion of a space needs consultant to come in and kind of help look at all of this in a much bigger picture. Pushing this off for a year is not a bad plan for our side.
Do you want me to make that change then?
Yeah, that change can be made moving ahead. But really, again, this is my first opportunity. We've got some needs in the fire department that, in moving ahead operationally, that are going to require some capital expense as we go. So I just thrown in here vehicle planning. This is all of the vehicles that we have in the fleet. Generally, NFPA for a fire apparatus, the recommendations are 20 years. So we are beyond our 20-year mark when it comes to our the Pierce Kenworth pumper tender and the ladder truck. Both are past that 20-year mark. We're still okay with them. Both of those trucks have been starting to cost us money, nickel and diming, a little more expensive. We actually put some money into the ladder truck and into the hydraulics, and the goal was to try and extend the life of the truck, and that has caused its own problems by disrupting everything. So we're trying to, this is just everything that we've got as far as rolling stock, I call it, the actual vehicles. Next, Dave. And then we've got a few other things that aren't vehicles. We've got some trailers, we've got a boat, and then 2 UTVs that we use for brush firefighting, off-road rescue, that type of thing that we use, whether it's frozen lakes, chasing people down in the snow that may be stuck, snowmobilers, or assisting during Set de Mai, during the parade run. We will loan one of those to EMS for things too. So, but it's a very used all over the place. Next. Some big things that are coming up on the horizon: the replacement fire engine, engine 2, the air pack replacement. One good thing about that is the Fire Act grants that I talked about before. Air packs generally sit pretty high in their priority list, so I'm pretty confident that we can get a grant to pay for the vast majority of that. Generally, it's a 5 to 10% match, but about 2026 is when we need to have on the agenda to be replacing those, because the bottles have a 15-year lifespan, and 27 is when they'd expire. So we've either got to buy new bottles and keep them on the old packs, or replace everything over. The preference is to replace everything over, because all of the straps, all of the stuff in the air packs are starting to wear out, and again, maintenance and nickel diming is starting to occur on those quite a bit. And with them being as important as they are in a structure fire, it's really, really nerve-wracking to have one of those fail during a call. And then ladder truck replacement we talked about. Next. So these are just kind of my thoughts moving ahead as we start looking at space needs. Training facilities, I referenced it before. We don't have a good spot for the fire department to go that we can just go and not be in someone else's space. You know, we can do some training in the parking lot at the MAT Center if nobody else is there. Public Works allows us to use their spot when they're not there at night. But we don't have a really good spot to throw ladders against. That isn't a building that has really good, that we're not in danger of messing up the facade of the building. Putting hoses, doing extrication on cars, we can't just leave a car and pick at it over the course of a few days as we can get people through there. That type of stuff is really what the goal would be for the training facilities. Sleeping quarters, this is a common thing. Consistent, you know, EMS is looking at trying to expand what they have as well. I would like to, for the fire department, start an internship program where young people coming into the fire service, they stay at the fire station, they run call. It's pretty popular amongst in Dane County. That's how I got started, was at Maple Bluff as an intern many years ago. But we can't start it because I've got absolutely nowhere that I can keep people up to stay down here. In fact, if I have people that live outside of a very defined area on duty crew, I can't even give them a spot at the station really because we don't have anything. And then we start talking about future facilities. We've got, you know, traffic in downtown Stoughton has gotten pretty thick. I mean, when it gets bad, trying to get from the west down Main Street to the station can get to be a problem. And so looking at what I would say a second location that we could operate out of that would be closer to where some of our volunteers live would allow us to continue a paid-on-call volunteer type program, but we got to get the equipment closer to where people live. So the northwest corner of the city, anyone who joins there, they get really disappointed because rarely do they make a truck, because it's 10 minutes from when the pager goes off till they can get to the station. So they end up sitting at the station quite a bit, which hinders our recruitment and retention and all of that. The reality is people join the fire department. One of the things they like doing is they like the excitement of riding the truck to the call. And that, having all the trucks leave the station has its own risk impact that we have to measure as well. So we try and balance that, but not all calls need 3 trucks out the door either. Next. So operational side, we talk about staffing. Daytime stuff is really where we're going to be. You'll hear more about this in the operational side, but we're starting to really get hit hard on daytime calls. And the people that are around who are going on more of those daytime calls are working places, and their places of work start getting concerned when their people are gone more and more and more as our call volume builds. So trying to figure out how this works into that study and operationally how we're going to work in the future is important too. Next. We can go through this. Talked about training. Next. So this picture on here, all of those spots are various members of the Stoughton Fire Department, their addresses. I put it up here just so everyone kind of appreciates how far out people can be responding in from, as well as where people live. I've This is a map I put together on Google Earth just to kind of illustrate where the station is, where everyone lives. Interestingly enough, for our fire calls, there isn't really a hot spot that I would call for our fire calls. So it's not like a fire station should go one place because most of our fire calls are within a 4-block area, as opposed to EMS, which has a street that we go to a lot. But this is just a consideration of space needs, that type of discussion moving ahead. It really, taking this information, combining it with a whole bunch else, there's consultants out there that can really meld this and work toward what is a good plan for the city moving in 10, 15 years, 5 years or 15, however far out we want to go. So, but the reality is, it's not just fire that needs this. Law enforcement is short space, EMS is short space, there's other departments. I mean, meeting rooms, I personally would really like to be able to say that we don't hold meetings at the fire station, but the reality is, with as much space as it has, it's a pretty big resource in the city to make sure that all the committees and everyone can have meetings when they start overlapping schedule-wise. So I think moving ahead, there's other cities that have built additions that have accommodated public safety as well as city government in their expansion process. So I think it's good for us to look at that as well. Next. And that is it. Any questions from anyone?
Lisa?
It is.
What is RDC on the water rescue boat? Thank you.
It is a manufacturer's name.
Oh,
Ocean
okay.
it's their model is RDC, and I don't recall what that is, but it's a banana boat essentially.
Okay, so that's why it's not much money. I thought maybe I
Yeah,
misunderstood
yeah.
something on that. And then just, because I always worry about sustainability stuff, is there a resource or a place, where would those 30 other tables go? I'm just curious. Do we have places that buy those? Do they end up in a landfill, or?
We typically, anything that is surplus goes to Wisconsin surplus auction.
Okay.
There's the swap, but there's also Wisconsin surplus out in Mount Horeb. All of our vehicles go out there for sale. Really, anything that goes through vehicle maintenance, I would imagine the tables can go there. There's a lot that runs through there just beyond vehicles. So
You might get a little money back.
Yep.
Okay. And then just on the PPE, to clarify, so it looks like there's money budgeted for a number of years at 60-some thousand. Did you say, is that going to be ongoing nearly forever, or do you think this?
Yeah, pretty much.
Because they just die,
It's a rotation through, using 35 to 40 members on the department, and then figuring some of that is we're gonna get some gear that is damaged beyond repair, and we also have to factor in that sometimes we'll have gear for somebody who's this tall and 110 pounds, and then we get somebody on the department who is 6'5" and 300 pounds. There's some sizing issues we run into there where we just have to buy new gear because we don't have anything that remotely fits that individual.
that was it for me. Thank you.
Any other questions, people online or in the room? Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
It's a great presentation. Now we move to IT. John. Oh, the dynamic duo is coming up.
Yeah, I bring Derek with me because he's my emotional support.
Emotional support. Yay.
For those of you that don't know us, my name is John Montgomery. I'm the Director of IT. And Derek Westby is my senior network administrator, and he also oversees all of the media services functions, which is a lot of what we do in here for council and around the community. If you would like to go to the next one, that would be great. We're going to do this as a two-prong approach here. I'm going to handle some of the IT stuff, that the CIP requests that we have, and Derek will take on the media as well as some of the IT. As Josh had mentioned in his presentation, he rotates his MDCs out every 3 years, which is a good idea for the vehicles in there because they're specialized laptops and they go through an awful lot of abuse. We have in our CIP where we replace a third of the computers every year, or roughly every 3 to 5 years. HP has recently increased their warranty period from 3 years to 5 years, so we're going to be stretching that out a little bit. But we do have a $30,000 in there which handles all of our hardware replacements, as well as there's monitors in there. We also throw printers in there whenever those things need to be replaced.
John, on that, when you say you're replacing computers, that's for all city staff that you replace? It's not just for IT?
Correct. There's roughly 120 devices that we handle throughout the city. The next one, network upgrades. Those are basically the whole backbone of the network when you're talking about switches, firewalls, routers that we may have in there, that we keep those always under warranty, because one of the last things that you ever want to do is have a mission critical piece of equipment that dies and it is not under warranty. Because if it is not under warranty, you end up paying for the replacements, you pay for the service calls, and your service calls also goes to the bottom of the pile. We have a next day response on all of our enterprise equipment that we have. So all of those, depending upon the type of equipment, whether it's a switch or a firewall, goes through, it's introduced, end of life, end of support, end of cycle. Once it hits those and it's no longer under support, we replace those items. Next one. Oh, we also have air fiber in there too, which is some of the technology that we're using for connecting buildings that are a little harder to get to. For instance, when we acquired the McFarland Bank, the City Hall building, we had a very short time of getting network telephones and all of our stuff over to there. Well, there was not an opportunity for us to get anything bid out for fiber connections because you're talking a year for that. So we ended up connecting that building via air fiber. Think of it like, your fiber going into your house or your business, but it's running across the air. And we're looking at doing the same thing with a few other buildings. We have a bridge that's going between the Opera House and the Youth Center, which we're going to be upgrading that one shortly. We're looking also at bringing EMS onto an air fiber connection, and then also routing something down to the senior center. Reason being is then we are not dependent upon the physical fiber, which tends to get torn down by dump trucks, squirrels, and semis, which have all happened in the past 5 years.
Do you have a question, Lisa?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I have one, John. On your UPSs, do you swap the batteries out on those, or do you just replace the whole units?
Swap the batteries.
Okay.
Until it becomes, if we have to swap it more than twice, then usually it's hit end of life. So we just pull them out then.
Can you just, again, what is air fiber? I'm just trying to visualize what you're talking about.
You'll see them around town a lot. They're basically, if you look, you'll see a dish, yay big or so. Not a concave one, but more of a closed surface. And think of it like a real powerful Wi-Fi. And it's based on line of sight. So we just basically point it this way, and it has a transceiver on it. So it hooks into our network, and then we send the signal, they receive it, it sends back, and that's where all of the data goes. For instance, there's a gig connection between the library and City Hall, and that delivers all of the data and all the phone calls. And it routes from the roof of the library down into the data closet there, underneath 4th Street, and into the basement here.
Is there any like health concerns with the transmission of people getting in?
No,
mains?
it's, nobody's gonna walk in front of it.
Okay, so it's up high.
It's up high, it's on the roof,
And there's no, I'm just trying to figure out, because there's all these electrical
yeah.
things that people are exposed to that are causing health problems. I was just wondering if that was.
No, these are all narrow beam.
Okay.
Yep, I'm gonna turn it over to Derek now.
So in 2024, we're asking to replace cameras that we bought in 2019. Our cameras that we use out in the field have about a 5-year lifespan, which is unfortunate, but that's kind of the reality. And we would be swapping out some cameras from 2019 with the camera you see on the screen. We would be getting 3 of them for a cost of $24,000. Next slide. We're also looking at closed captioning for our TV broadcasts, both on TDS and Spectrum, as well as on all of our apps and our website. So $12,000 will get about 10 years worth of captioning. And there's an example on there from another community channel in Wisconsin that has closed captioning. And we'd buy it right from our broadcast server company, and our server would do all the work for us. So it's just buying the ability to do it. Next. And then we'd be replacing some tripods from 2019 also because of the change in camera technology. The tripods we had are made for a smaller form camera and not really made for the weight of the cameras that we'd be purchasing or the cameras that we already replaced a couple of years ago. Next slide. And then we're also looking at a 4-camera wireless system for $8,000. This would help cut down on the amount of staff we use for setting up our multi-camera productions out in the field. It would also help reduce risk to the city because right now we're running 250-foot reels of cable through the grass, and we can't tape them down, and people can and have tripped on them, so we're trying to get away from physical wires as much as possible. I think, do you want to talk about this one? Yeah. Okay. And then we're looking forward to 2025. In 2025, the main host and storage attached network, or storage area network, sorry, that all of our servers run on is needing to be replaced, and that's $100,000 for that. And then the current host and SANs that we have will be repurposed into our disaster recovery as that one has, I guess, surpassed end of life. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that we have will be decommissioned and recycled. I think that's all we've got. Any questions?
Well,
Thank you.
it's amazing that the cameras, it just seems like yesterday that we funded all this. So,
Time flies.
again, I guess, maybe I do have a question for you, Derek. Going back to Lisa's question, will all your cameras and tripods go back into swap, or what do you do with them?
They could be sold. They're in kind of rough shape because they get, put in a van, taken out of a van, put in a van, taken out of a van, put in our staff people's cars as they run out to tape stuff. So they do wear out. I don't know if anybody would even really want them.
Is there a recycling program, or is it a landfill problem?
The city has an electronics recycling dumpster, so we put it in there and then they get that recycled.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Library.
Library. Hello. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jim Ramsey. I'm the director of the Stoughton Public Library. I always appreciate the opportunity to present at CIP. In years past, the library hasn't always presented. Our requests tend to be smaller dollar amounts, but still important, and I do appreciate the opportunity. So I actually just have 3 CIP items for 2024, and I'll go through each of them. The first one, you can go ahead to the next slide, Dave. First one is a replacement of computers and peripherals, and I was reminded of this while John and Derek were up here. I don't know if you know this, but the library, all of our network support and everything to do with our PC support, our network infrastructure, all of that, city IT doesn't do anything with that, which I'm sure John is thankful for, because we can be kind of demanding, as you would imagine a library would be. So all of that is handled through South Central Library System, which is the 7-county library consortium that we're a part of. So this first item for replacement of computers and peripherals is a recurring item. We increased this amount slightly in 2020. And then we increased it slightly again this year, but I see no need to increase it for 2024. As John could tell you, and as everybody's talked about so far, prices of everything is going up. That it's especially true for anything with a microchip in it, anything IT. So South Central Library System, like I said, they're the 7-county consortium that we're a member of. They provide us with network and PC support. They have a recommended replacement schedule, just like John has for all of the devices that he oversees. And so we cycle our computers through, they have kind of a life cycle. Typically a PC will start out life as a staff station, and then as it ages, it will become a public internet computer, and then it will be a public access catalog station before it's finally recycled. We have about 12 public stations and about 13 staff computers at the library, so roughly a little bit more than 24 devices. Peripherals here includes things like printers, scanners, receipt printers, keyboards, RFID tagging, pads that write to RFID tags. So that's it for computers and peripherals. Go on to the next one. Replacement of furniture and fixtures. This is also a recurring item. This was first included in the CIP budget this year. Prior to this year, there was no budget line for purchasing replacement furniture and fixtures. So in years past, we kind of had to just scrape together whatever money we could find from like leftover fundraising monies or gift funds when we needed to buy something new for the library, a new piece of furniture or a fixture. So new and expanding collections and the changing use of space post-pandemic requires new furniture and fixture solutions. One example of this I can give you is what we're spending the CIP money on this year, which is new seating for our teen area. We found that post-pandemic, certainly when we reopened after the shutdown, we saw a lot of people coming back with their own devices. More people had their own laptops, their own tablets, and there was less of a demand. There still is a demand, but there was less of a demand for the fixed desktop computers. A lot of people had their own devices. So we've kind of pivoted and started to increase seating and maybe take away some of these stations and put seating in their place when we can. So in our teen area, there were 2 desktop computers that we removed, and we're going to replace those with some seating. So it's things like that. Our furniture gets quite a bit of use, as you might imagine. There's a lot of people sitting in it, so things wear out. Again, this is a recurring item. I don't see any reason to increase it for the next year. Finally, you want to go on to the next one? The bigger ticket item on there is a replacement for the self-check machines, self-checkout machines. These machines are similar to the ones you see at the grocery store, though unfortunately they're not as sophisticated as the ones that they have at Pick and Save. They allow library patrons to check out items and manage their accounts without staff intervention. That's when they're working properly. When they're not working properly, they require a great deal of staff intervention. Having these self-checkout machines, excuse me, it's the reason why we're able to get by with fewer staff at the circulation desk, which is the busiest desk in the building. If not for these self-checkout machines, and there are 2 of them, we would need an extra person on duty at the desk most of the time, especially during peak times. The current machines are reaching the end of their useful life. They're starting to make more errors, which increases the amount of staff time needed to help patrons use them successfully. I'll give you one example here without getting too into the weeds. So how many of you use the library like to place holds? You can request an item that's, Lisa, good. You can request items that are on the shelf at any other library in our 7-county system, and you can have them delivered to pick up at our library. So people come in, when those holds arrive for people to pick up, they go on our open holds shelf. People come in with their library card, they pick up the hold, they go to the self-check machine, and they try to check it out. A lot of times, especially recently, they think they've checked it out and they haven't, so they leave with the item. And then in a few days, when we run a report every morning, these items show up on the list. Oh, okay, this item is lapsed, nobody picked it up, you need to move it on to the next person. Wait, no, it's not here. Oh, that's because somebody took it home. So our staff are ending up having to follow up with patrons, oftentimes calling them and emailing them, trying to track down these items. There's essentially 2 vendors that provide these machines, Biblioteca and Envisionware. Our machines were purchased from Biblioteca, and at the time, this vendor provided most of the self-check machines for the 50-plus libraries in our consortium. But in the intervening years, most libraries have had issues with these machines similar to the ones that we're having, and they've switched over to Envisionware. They've found Envisionware to be more reliable and longer lasting. As we'll see in a second, they also came in lower on the bid. And so Envisionware is also offering us a 10-year service plan on these machines, whereas Biblioteca only offered a 5-year plan. So as the other thing, speaking of the plan, the service contract, as the machines age, the service contracts are getting more and more expensive for the machines that we do have. Envisionware is a vendor that we are using for our RFID, radio frequency ID tagging equipment. So having the same vendor for the self-checks, which are also reading those tags, would be helpful. We reached out to both vendors because even though we had issues with Biblioteca, we wanted to give them a chance and see where they came in at. And the bid for the Envisionware machines came in about $2,000 less than the Biblioteca quote. Go on to the next. Yeah, this is what they look like. Like I said, they're a less fancy version of what you see at Pick and Save. You know, they don't have weight-sensitive surfaces or anything like that. But like as they start to fail and make more mistakes, it ends up being a bigger burden on our staff, and certainly more staff time taken with things like that. That's all I have. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Jim. Do we
Any
have any
questions?
questions? Lisa?
Does the 17.5 include the 10-year
Yes, yeah.
maintenance agreement or kind of thing, or you don't have to, that's
Well,
not another
that we
yearly?
actually, yeah, that's included for the first year, but that's the maintenance contract is in our operating
So,
costs.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, it's a good question.
Any other questions?
I guess I'll add one. And then that service contract, are they running about 10% instrument cost per year thereafter, or?
I don't know the answer to that offhand. I know that you're talking in terms of how much they go up per year over year?
No, yeah, I mean, so, you know, if it's included, usually they'll throw it in for your first year, and then you buy the service contract annualized after that.
Yes.
And a lot of places, I was just wondering if they were around about 10% of instrument, or.
I have to confess, I
cost.
don't know that offhand. I
All
could.
right, no worries.
No, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, none? Thank you, Jim.
Well, thank you.
Last but not least is the senior center. Dave, are you taking this?
Yeah, I'm taking this one. Cindy could not make it tonight. And if you wish, she can come back at our next meeting. This is basically the start of a conversation for expanding for more parking for the senior center. And so we don't have a lot of detail right now, and it's a lot of estimates at this point. So what I'm going to be recommending to Cindy is that we can either have her come back at the next meeting and try and give us a little bit more detail, or potentially move this one item to the subsequent year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, either way that she's ready, because I'm trying to figure out where she's planning on expanding, unless going up.
I know she's not going up. She's got a couple ideas, but they're not firm at this point. Let's put it that way.
Lisa?
Do you know if someone has had conversations with Liv Sriza, whose parking lot is almost always empty, about sharing that space?
I am not aware of any.
That was the first thing I was thinking, that maybe it could be reserved for, maybe it's senior center parking Monday through Friday, or if they have a special event. I've never seen
anything.
except Set and Demai, and sometimes they bring their big old bus in there, drop people off, and then leave. But that's, I just don't like the idea of any more pavement in the city if we can help it, especially if there's a space that may already be available.
I can mention something to both Cindy and Rodney, see if that conversation has occurred in the past.
Yeah, it seems like that would make a lot of sense to, I can understand why they wouldn't want to maybe open it up to, the community as a whole, but for senior center parking, I think that would be a great opportunity to share that space, even if we could help cover the cost of maintaining it or something, or cover the cost of maintaining it.
Sure.
Anyway.
Right, it'd be cheaper than building a new.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll work on getting you some numbers too. There's approximately 19 parking spots in the parking lot that's right behind the annex. And there's about 6 parking spots from the annex toward the bridge. And then there is the underground parking, which is typically, the employees park there. I'm not sure exactly how many spaces are down there. So with the addition of the annex, there's opportunity to have more people there. If you drive by on certain mornings, you'll see there's a lot of cars parked there. But what I don't know is like what some of the future events might look like. And I think part of the concern is, oftentimes we're talking about people that have mobility issues that want to use the center. So I think that would be part of what Cindy could share with you.
Well, then you could create, the closer parking spaces all be handicap, and then people that don't. But do you know how many more parking spaces she's looking to add? Is that a great number? I mean, what are we talking about?
Again, things are very fluid right now. She's got a couple ideas that she's looking at, but they have different space requirements, and just when we're looking at it, they've got different various projects that we would have to do to create the spacing.
So you don't know how many additional spaces she needs besides what she already has?
That number was not bantied about, no.
Yeah, not at this point. And I think that part of it is maybe not what they need today, but it might be as they grow, the use of the additional facilities. And I know when I spoke with her, she said she was really appreciative of the action that the council took in order to change the current parking to make it more for senior citizen or senior center, patrons. instead of just the general public. So I think that's helped. I don't know if we totally understand the impact of that yet. So we'll bring back some more information, but I think really the main part of this was just to get it on the radar. And it might be something that if we don't feel we're at a place where we can approve it in the CIP now, it could be part of an ongoing discussion between the time the CIP is approved and we actually borrow the money. We may have more data by then.
And I guess the other thing I'd be asking is that employees not be parking there. That's, quite unusual I just don't think they should be parking right there. I think, like many of us who have jobs, we might be walking blocks. It's one thing if they have a mobility issue, but I think that would be the first thing that would need to be given up, is to move the employees.
To left, right, so that would be easier.
Or anywhere, I don't know, give them, I'm not sure, but I think, over, can they walk from, behind that public parking that's over behind Kaganza Plaza? Yeah, I mean, we've been spoiled in this city. Everybody thinks they want to park in front of the place where they're going. And if you don't have mobility issues, it's a really good thing to get out and walk. And there's plenty of seniors who walk and would probably not need to park right there and probably would be fine with walking. So I think there's
Unless in the winter.
some more homework. Right. We probably need to do some more homework, but to start, I guess.
Okay, so Dave, what are we seeing now?
Did things a little bit differently than we did in the past. I've actually got things in 2 different spreadsheets. One is just for the streets and stormwater construction. And then I've got a second spreadsheet that looks a little bit more usual, what you're seeing for the, well, did that picture? Yes, it did. Stop sharing and share this one. And this is more the format that you're looking at. Just trying to get Brett's information in the same one. Looks like it's a lot of work, and I split it in 2 to make it easier for everybody, or hopefully it's easier. So I guess I'm opening up the floor to you. What do you folks want to do? Do you want to look at the individual detail, or do you have specific questions? I don't know if anybody's looked at things. I see Lisa's trying to squint and see them.
I guess, Dave, my question is, I know this isn't like what we do in the budget, but for CIP, the total that you've gotten from the team leaders, is that doable, or do we need to start being strategic of looking at each of the department's budget to see if there's things that need to be postponed or delayed or cut?
Well, I guess that's kind of a broad question, because as I mentioned earlier, we can do as much debt as you want. The question is, do you want to issue all that debt or not? If you look on the screen right now, and I've got some questions that I need to work with Dan on, so his numbers might change a little bit, but right now you're looking at $7 million that the departments have requested. I'm just going to grab that, the construction spreadsheet. And you're looking at about $6 million for roads. So you're looking at $13 million if you want to approve everything. Now, I could certainly start going forward with some estimates, but it's kind of where you want to be at.
I guess I want to know how close we're getting to our 4% when we start borrowing, $13 million. I mean, with some of the roads, I mean, we get paid back some, right? So.
Well, you don't, if you're asking if the construction of the roads or the repaving or whatever we do, that's included in the calculations for the general transportation aids. And that's based upon your last 6 years of expenses. And then the state pays roughly 18–20% of that average. So yeah, we do get money back. I can certainly calculate, what the total would potentially bring up for debt, but we issued quite a bit of debt. That was about $9 million, or we authorized $9 million in debt. You're going to see that soon for the debt issue 2023 this year. And even with that debt, you're looking at the total property tax levy going down. The debt levy is going up from the mill rate, but the total is going down. So I understand where you're asking, where should we issue or where shouldn't we? And it's more of a philosophy, how much you want to have the taxes going up. Both last year and this year, I told Rodney and Brett, I don't want to give you a dollar amount for roads because you're looking at the PACER rating and everything else, but road construction costs with asphalt and everything, you're looking at anywhere from 12 to 18, maybe 20% increase in prices each year. So what happens if you give the streets department a goal saying no more than $5 million, and I'm just going to make up numbers. Let's say that gives you 12 miles of roads that you've worked at. Well, the next year, $5 million, that might only give you 11 miles of roads. So if you keep that at an arbitrary figure, you're hurting yourself, and eventually
Right,
got
that's not what I'm looking at. I'm just trying to make sure. So you talked about us having around 2.5% of our 4. I just don't want us to get to the point where we're bumping up to our ceiling and looking ahead. We have some major expenses coming in through the fire department and through EMS and others that I don't want to at some point say, oh no, now we're going to go up to our 5%. I want to see what the current ask, where we would be at, and so we can start figuring out.
That's going to be a fairly easy calculation because I'm just going to take the totals for each year that the departments have requested, add that to the current debt that we have right now, and put in an estimate for what the equalized value is going to go up. So yeah, I can give you a fairly easy answer, and I'm just going to throw out numbers now. We're at 2.4 this year. Maybe if everything goes through, we're at 2.7, and then the following year you were at 3, and then we go down to 2.8. Whatever the numbers are, that's fairly easy, and I can show those to you.
Yeah, and then with that, like you said, just like what that means for somebody's taxes. So, I mean, I think it not only helps us as decision makers, but it also helps our community that, when the hub writes an article, they'll say, okay, this is what it actually means. When, look at the city borrowing another 13 million, blah, 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 and we get all harassed. But then when it comes down to what the increase in their potential taxes are, you're like, oh, okay, that's not so bad. So that helps us because we get phone calls to be able to
what I can
say
also
what that is.
do on that calculation, I mentioned earlier on the operating levy, we want to make sure we go up to the maximum. I'll make the assumption right now that next year we're going to have a record year. We've had a lot of development, but I can go forward in the assumption and assume a 2% increase in the operating levy so that we look at both the debt and operations together. So that's a fairly easy calculation that I can do.
Okay, thank you, Dave. That would help me, and it would help me be able to explain it when people call.
Okay?
Right.
And I think at least over the last couple of years, as far as our debt limit versus our policy. We've been on a downward trend for that percentage since I think probably when the Public Works garage went in, I think was the last big bump up in our total debt amount, and then we've been kind of gradually like chipping away at that for several years. So it's in a good direction.
It's in a good direction, and honestly, with the growth that Dane County has, that is helping us. So without looking, without calculating it, I would be surprised if we approach 3% in any of these years going forward.
Well, but if we're talking like some major renovations to this building, you know, possibly the fire station, I mean, that could be another big bump like our public works.
I can throw in,
You have a
I'm
debt
think-
schedule.
pardon me?
You have the debt schedule.
I've got the
We
debt
can-
schedule
we can
now,
update
and what I
that.
could do is just do the calculations that I was talking about, and then have a what if, and I'm just going to throw out a number now. What if we spent $45 million for a new building? What would that do?
Okay.
Probably make headlines.
Probably.
But I think the other thing is one thing we've done pretty well is when we borrow the money, we're not borrowing it for a year, right? We're borrowing it over multiple years if we're doing bonds.
Correct.
So, and then we pay it off aggressively.
We've been fairly aggressive. Lately, we've been extending it out a little bit more just to try and keep the levy a little bit lower, but you also want to look at the life of the asset. For instance, squads for the police department, 3 years is probably maximum on those. You don't want to have a 10-year debt on the squad because you're still paying debt when the vehicle's long gone. So, you know, that kind of limits some things. So you kind of look at estimated useful life, but
Yeah, I think my big concern is definitely with the vehicle costs, because I think, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you were going to do the ladder truck this year, and it was $875, but now it's going to be $950 next year. Am I reading that correctly? So,
Yeah, the ladder truck was originally scheduled for next year.
or 24.
24, yep.
850, and now it's going to be pushed out to 25 for 950.
Yeah, and that 850 was an old number. That's what they paid for the current one back in '03, and the number didn't get escalated correctly over the years with things. So that's why there's that giant jump in it, but the past few years haven't helped it either.
Yeah. So I think, you know, I would agree we shouldn't be pushing off things that are, you know, we're just delaying the, you know, the inevitable, but I'm also like to be conservative about stuff, you know, it's like just because we have the money, I'm not comfortable necessarily buying all of the stuff, especially when there's, you know, these vehicles can cost so much more than, you know, already we're looking at $75,000 in a
well, and I absolutely agree. You have to look at the cost benefit of it. I'll make up a ludicrous example, but if we said we needed to have chauffeur service for staff between the buildings so that they don't get wet between meetings, you'd probably look at us and say, what the heck are you thinking? But you're absolutely right. You know, if we say the ladder or the fire engine replacement, well, $950 is too much. We can't afford that this year. Well, now it's $1050 the next year, and so forth. So you got to kind of look at it. But just like in a household, you say, I'm going to be able to afford this year, but I'll plan on it next year. That's one of the reasons you do a 5-year CIP, so you've got a general idea of what's going on.
And when we get to some of the other presentations, you're going to see some examples of where we could purchase equipment that looks like it's expensive now, but it has a short-term payoff, similar to what you might do when you're considering putting in solar panels in your homes and things like that. So you're making the investment, but you know on the back end you're going to be money ahead. So you're going to see examples of that when we get to some of the other presentations in the second and third meeting.
And I can give you a live example that we recently installed solar panels on our house. July was the first full month that I had solar panels in, and granted, longer days compared to December. My electric bill was a credit of 26 cents. So I'll be interested to see how it's going, but that's exactly right. You know, there is a payback on it, you know, that you've got lower expenses.
Anybody else have any questions on this?
Or anything else that you're looking for, high-level numbers or anything like that?
How much higher can we go? High level numbers.
Well,
Dave?
yes.
On the capital improvement plan version 3 spreadsheet that you were saying, that pivot tables, can you explain the graph on the lower right? Right there?
This one here?
Yes.
That is just showing what fund has the expenses in it. So TID number 5 is one of our industrial TIDs. And there's certain items in there that we're working on storm sewer or something, so we'd be charging those to the TID. But if you look down at the bottom, 410 capital outlay, $6.3 million. That's where the majority of all these items are coming from. If you go to the detail tab, I've got the fund here in column D, so that's just telling us where we're putting things. But for instance,
So all the ones that are capital outlay are where you have to borrow for. The other ones come out of other funds, right?
That's a good way to put it, yes. So for instance, Dan has things that developer fee or impact fees would be paying for. The stormwater system is an enterprise fund that's actually charged out on the Stoughton utilities bill to everybody on a monthly basis. Refuse collection, that's part of the, I don't even remember the dollar amount that we get charged, but yes, we're issuing debt primarily for 410 capital outlay. The others typically have some revenue sources. The TIF may or may not have revenue sources, but we try and put as much there as we can to keep it off the levy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you'll see, there's going to be some presentations where it's kind of a timing issue, because we may, for parks, for example, and Dan will walk us through this, in some cases, you know, typically what we do is we do a master plan of the park, we do the engineering, and then we actually do the playground or shelter or whatever we install in there, and sometimes it's over a 3-year period. So sometimes we may have already collected the impact fee, which comes when building permits are pulled, and other times we haven't pulled enough building permits, or they haven't applied for any yet when we want to start doing the work. So then the question is well, do you want to build the park before, during, or after the development is occurring? And so there's some decision points in there that I think you're going to be, you know, asked to consider on the parks. And sometimes what happens is we'll borrow the money and then pay it back through the impact fees. And in the past, some of those decisions haven't been that difficult because interest rates have been low. But now that interest rates are higher, it's a little bit different conversation. The good news for us is the money that, you know, we have invested, and, you know, we're collecting more interest on that. The bad news is when we borrow, now we have to pay those additional costs. So there's going to be decisions like that to make as well. But really the point that Dave made on the roads especially is we've been really aggressive with the roads the last several years because the philosophy has been different. The philosophy is not to set a number, it's to do it based on need, because the cost does go up and you're just not going to get as much bang for your buck. And on some of the equipment, it's the same way, and you guys are going to be charged to try to sort all that out and ultimately, make the recommendations. So when we take the full budget to the council, we have a plan that we think is, being the best stewards of the tax dollars as we can. But it's a process. There's a lot of information. Tonight's meeting was the first one. It'd probably be the least complicated one out of all of them. When you start getting into roads, it really not only affects roads, it affects the planning department, the public works department, it affects some of the utility projects as well. And they work together in order to come up with these short and long-term plans. And, they'll be able to walk you through that. So by the time you leave some of those meetings, your head might hurt. Mine still does after all these years. But hopefully you'll find it helpful in your decision-making process.
And just to comment on the road construction, that's one that we want to tread lightly if we're going to say, let's delay this one a year, because we don't know the effects of that. Is this a state project? We can't delay it. Or if we're delaying it 1 year, what does that do to utilities? Or if we move things, so that one with the multiple departments working together, I'd be hesitant to make changes to a year for that location without getting their blessing.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else that you want to go over, Dave, tonight?
I don't think so. Part of me was just saying, what do you want to see? This is my second year doing it here. I saw some things that I thought worked good last year, and some things it's like, I don't want to do it that way again this year. So, I'm trying to improve. And so if you guys are asking for things, that's what I want to provide to you.
No, I like your spreadsheets a lot better this year than last year. So
Good.
And your explanations. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and if you wake up in the middle of the night tonight in a cold sweat, and you think, oh, I should have asked this question, just email him to Dave, and then he can compile the questions and answer them for everybody at the next meeting. Because if you have the question, somebody else might be thinking the same thing.
Yeah, don't delay your sleep. Send Dave an email at 3 in the morning.
I'll probably be awake because I usually wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and lay there in bed for a couple hours.
Well,
But if you wake up in a warm sweat, you should probably worry that you got norovirus.
thanks for that reality check, Brett. So, all right, I think we're done for the night. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move. No?
Lisa, then Brett?
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I don't think Amy's going to oppose. Thank you, everybody, for a great meeting. Thank you, Dave, for compiling everything. Thank you, team leaders. Next week, 7:30, because they're trying to do back-to-back meetings. So get plenty of sleep on Wednesday night, because you won't be getting much on Thursday.
Thank you,
'cause I'm
folks.
going to Brandy Carlisle, so yeah.
There you go.